CDOs should absolutely be putting MDM near the top of the list, maybe not number one, but certainly towards the top of the list. And the primary reason why is the enablement of digital transformation and digital acceleration, right? We've seen some incredible changes in the world over the last couple of years, whether we want to talk about political changes, whether we want to talk about market changes, everything happening related to the pandemic. Yet, meanwhile, CDOs have a remit of digital transformation. They need to quickly understand who their customers are. They need to redefine their customer experiences. They need to recalibrate their supply chains, right? They need to be able to respond faster to these global disruptions that nobody could have imagined were even possible 3 years ago. But CDOs need to have a strategy around this. And at the core of all of those things, whether that's customer experience, whether that's product experience, whether that's the global supply chain, is data. It's master data. And CDOs need to have a strategy for this, and they need to have MDM towards the top of their priority list. Otherwise, they will be left behind.
Couldn't agree more. And if you did, another way I would say it generally is if you don't put that monitoring and enforcement of those policies in place that you've arrived at through data governance, you can't transmit any of the benefits of that knowledge to any of your downstream systems and actors. So you're not going to change anything, really. You might have a bunch of knowledge sitting out there, but no really actionable technical changes can take place. As soon as the value is shown, there's something that someone here calls the flywheel of enthusiasm, and someone says, oh, that's what you mean? I can actually get that in a trustworthy way, that data? I have 10 more things I want to do with that. And so then your biggest issue becomes, what of those 10 more things, what are the most valuable of those? And you go over and over and over again, iterating, until eventually you get where you would have gotten if you tried to do everything at once.
A good way for CDOs to think about this from a master data perspective is that there's already value buried within each of these individual business silos. And if you're a new CDO who's been given the task of optimizing your customer relationships or your supplier relationships, how can you extract value above those silos, right? How can you create a kind of a sharing layer via MDM that creates exponential value, that allows you to do the 2 + 2 = 5, right? Because the value already exists within those data silos. It already exists within a CRM system or ERP system. But how do you create this new sharing layer that sits above everything else that could create that exponential value, that can provide insights that weren't abundantly obvious when you were only looking in within one of those silos, right? How can you create some of those new insight layers to drive value for the organization that they weren't previously aware of? That's MDM.
So MDM enforces these rules that we all came up with and spent money formulating, but again, nothing really happens until you start monitoring enforcement with an MDM technology, right? So again, you can change your customer onboarding process immediately. You can do real-time insights, not extend credit where it shouldn't be extended, not let somebody commit fraud, again, and that's below the line. Above the line, you can maybe extend them more credit or extend offers targeted to them based on what they've done in the past with full 100% confidence that you've got the right data and you're doing the right thing. That in effect is digital transformation. Without that, that cannot take place.
There is a lot of value that exists between the intersection of business silos, where a CDO can be very, very effective at exposing some of that value, right? Where previously that value may not have been shown because that silo was being managed, well, as a silo. Right? So a great example is balance of trade, right? Do you have an effective insight on your total balance of trade with your suppliers, where somebody's both a customer and a supplier, right? That's an example of value sitting at one of these intersections of these two separate silos where you didn't know that value existed before. Having these types of insights around balance of trade can be very, very effective. How can you show insights across customers and suppliers, or even within a customer data set where you understand, where you thought that there were two completely separate customer sets by line of business, where there was a silo that was based on the line of business, where if you intersect those using an MDM and MDM software, you can expose entirely new sets of value. Where say, okay, wait a minute, I didn't know those customers were related before, I didn't know they were part of the same corporate hierarchy. That's incredibly valuable to me from a cross-sell or an upsell perspective. So if you can break the silos, show the intersection of those silos, you can show great value to CDOs where that value wasn't really being exposed before. I would first recommend to a CDO or CEO having an engaging conversation. Don't talk about data quality. Don't talk about minutia of data. Don't talk about all the details around data and data quality. Don't make the conversation about I should say, make the conversation about business enablement, make the conversation about business value, and avoid going down a rabbit hole about how bad your data is. Yes, your data probably is bad. Yes, you are probably struggling with some data quality issues, but the CEO knows you're going to fix those. The CEO knows that you're going to address those. Really focus the conversation on business value.
One of the pieces of advice I regularly give our prospects and clients when I was an analyst was internally, before they went to the CEO, I would say, try to tell me why you want to do this and don't say the word data. Try to physically do that. Unless you're selling data, then we can talk about data all day long.
Right.
But most people aren't doing that. And I've had some pretty contentious face-to-face discussions, even with CEOs who couldn't do it, where I said, why do you think all this needs to happen? And there are four culprits in increasing order of frequency. When things are going badly, it's better data quality, better decisions, single version of the truth, and then 360-degree view with the customer. All those are great, but none of them are business outcomes.
Right.
So I would literally coach people, and you know this. What percentage of the time when you ask, what's your business reason for doing this? 360-degree view with a customer. That was the stock answer. I could mouth the words when someone waiting for the answer, and they're pretty shocked when you say, that's not an end goal. That's a tool to get somewhere. Where do you want to go?
Right.
So try it without the word data and see if you can do it. It's a real struggle for, I would say, most organizations at the beginning.
Business doesn't care about poor data. Right? Hard truth, right? The business cares about outcomes. The business cares about value, not necessarily poor data. Which for me at the time was like, wait a minute, we don't care about bad data. We need better data because I'm a data practitioner, and there's just something inherently wrong about hearing, well, if the data's bad, then we need to fix it. But totally agree with you. If you can have that conversation with a CEO or a CDO or a CFO, not use the word data, you're going to be in a better place. There's a number of things, right? MDM can be disruptive. MDM can be big. MDM can take months and months and months, but it doesn't have to. Number one thing that I would say is really focus on business outcomes. That's number one. Be razor focused on the delivery of a specific business outcome, right? And be very, very specific on that. Whether it's reducing your supplier costs or enabling cross-sell or upsell, or reducing your vendor risk or optimizing your supply chain. Be very, very specific about that outcome and then work backwards from that outcome. There are a number of other things that we could focus on in terms of how to kind of bootstrap an MDM strategy. But starting simple and being very, very razor focused on specific outcomes, that's a great starting point.
Most of it's about scope management now. It's
totally agree.
The idea, I like to talk about vendors like Profisee as taking technology off the table by making that part easy. There's other things about it that are never going to be easy. And the more value you're going to get, the harder it's going to be to get there. There's a relationship there. So, again, it's keep the scope, identify an initial scope that you can deliver, but stay with it. That mindset has to be maintained. We've had prospects here, and I've had clients as an analyst for years that did the right thing initially. You come back to them 6 months later, and they've fallen into the data pit of, we did the first use case, and then everybody got excited, so we decided to master everything.
Yeah.
Where are you now? Well, now we're 9 months in, and all we still talk about is that first use case, and it's not working anymore. So, we need to get that scope back down to something where we can deliver the second and the third one within 3 or 4 months, and that's what, Profisee as a vendor, for example, is very good at that.
Another thing to consider here around this notion of scope management and prioritization, which go hand in hand, is the ability to be a little pragmatic. As an MDM practitioner, be pragmatic. One thing to consider is go where you're wanted, right? If you can find a stakeholder that has an acute pain that could be solved by MDM, go there, right? Find people within the business who want to partner with you to solve these specific problems, right? I've spoken with many senior leaders, with many MDM leaders over the years, where the CEO gave the top-down direction and say, well, these are our business priorities, and those are fantastic, and those are great. But often those business priorities, the leaders of those priorities, right, at a functional level, maybe the supply chain executive or the finance executive, where often they don't see any MDM related problems. They don't have any acute pains related to MDM. And if you go knocking on that door saying, hey, I'm here to sell you MDM, often what you're gonna hear is, well, I don't really need it. Well, the CEO said that this is a priority, so we're gonna have to figure out a way to make this work, right? That's a riskier approach to MDM. So, go where you're wanted within the organization. If you can find a business stakeholder that wants to partner with you to solve a specific problem, fantastic place to start.